What if everything you thought you knew about Golden Age Hollywood was a lie? Behind the glitz, glamour, and red carpets were secrets so shocking they were buried for decades. These weren't just stars, they were master illusionists, hiding their true selves even from those closest to them. From tragic double lives to gender revelations that fooled the world, here are 15 vintage celebrities whose stories will leave you stunned, especially number 1. Number 15. Carroll Norman, the Forgotten Chameleon. Carroll Norman once ruled vaudeville stages, dazzling audiences with lightning-fast costume changes and a voice that could flip between male and female tones mid-song. But today, his name barely echoes in the dusty corners of Hollywood history. Born George Peduzzi in Baltimore around 1897, Norman wasn't just another impersonator. He was a living illusion machine, executing up to 6 distinct female characters in a single performance, each with their own voice, wardrobe, and personality. His act wasn't just gender-bending, it blurred race, class, and culture. He earned the nickname, the Creole Fashion Plate, a nod to both his elaborate costumes and his ambiguous performance of Southern exotic femininity that white audiences at the time found strangely captivating. But Norman's talent wasn't just visual. While many female impersonators lip-synced or relied on falsettos, Norman could actually sing in both male and female registers, switching mid-note, mid-song with effortless control. It was more than a gimmick. It was live, vocal shape-shifting. Despite headlining major venues and commanding top billing during his heyday, Norman's legacy was wiped clean, erased by time, forgotten by design. Why? His act didn't fit neatly into Hollywood's sanitized version of gender or race. The industry couldn't figure out how to frame him, so they simply didn't. Carroll Norman was once a headliner. Now he's barely a footnote. And that silence? It says more than any applause ever could. Number 14. Francis Renault, the slave of fashion. Francis Renault didn't just impersonate women, he resurrected queens. On stage, he became Cleopatra, Catherine the Great, Queen Victoria, each brought back to life with gowns so lavish they rivaled museum exhibits. Born Antonio Ariema in Naples around 1893, Renault rose to fame in the vaudeville circuit not by shock value, but by precision. Every gesture was studied, every historical costume meticulously researched. His goal wasn't just to mimic femininity, it was to archive it, one performance at a time. Some of his dresses were valued at today's equivalent of $50,000, not because of vanity, but because they were stitched with historical integrity. He didn't play characters, he became them. His act was part fashion show, part theater, part living time machine. Renault wasn't shy about his artistry either. In interviews, he described female impersonation as a discipline, not just entertainment. While others leaned on comedy or illusion, Renault stood firm in his belief: what he did was art. But despite his attention to detail, he too vanished from the spotlight. His crime? He didn't fit the narrative. He wasn't funny enough to be dismissed. He wasn't controversial enough to be remembered. So Hollywood tucked him away like last season's wardrobe. Renault preserved fashion history on stage, but Hollywood never returned the favor. Number 13. T.C. Jones, the master of celebrity illusion. T.C. Jones wasn't just a female impersonator, he was a one-man Hollywood archive. While the world conformed to rigid 1950s gender roles, Jones shattered them in silence, impersonating Hollywood legends with such eerie accuracy, he made even skeptics lean in. Born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Jones didn't dress as generic women. He became stars: Tallulah Bankhead, Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn. Each transformation was a full character study, complete with their unique voices, tics, and secrets. In an era where drag acts were shoved into seedy clubs or buried under laughs, Jones brought his art to Broadway. His show Mask and Gown premiered in Los Angeles in 1957 and moved to New York the next year, earning him critical acclaim not as a novelty, but as a legitimate actor. He graced mainstream platforms, like The Ed Sullivan Show and What's My Line, at a time when television was allergic to anything that challenged the American ideal of manhood. But TC didn't ask for permission. He earned respect. Jones never hid behind stage personas offstage. He maintained a clear divide: The illusion was for the theater. The truth? That lived quietly in the shadows. And perhaps that's why he never made it bigger. He was too graceful to scandalize, too polished to mock, and too dangerous to promote. Hollywood didn't know what to do with someone that good. So, like many before him, T.C. Jones was applauded, then quietly forgotten. Number 12. Jim Bailey. The voice that fooled Hollywood? Jim Bailey didn't just impersonate Judy Garland. He became her down to every tremble, every breath, every broken note of heartbreak. When he sang, even Garland's daughter, Liza Minnelli, had to do a double take. Bailey wasn't like other impersonators. He didn't rely on wigs and lip sync. He sang live, and not just as Judy. He embodied Barbra Streisand, Peggy Lee, and other iconic divas so perfectly that audiences, critics, and even insiders couldn't tell the difference. In the 1960s and 70s, when American television was still rigid and conservative, Bailey broke through prime time. The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, The Carol Burnett Show. These weren't late-night underground gigs. These were the biggest stages in the country, and Bailey dominated them. What made him palatable to mainstream America? Strategy. Bailey didn't present himself as a drag performer. He framed his work as character acting, leaning into technical mastery rather than gender defiance. That smart positioning let him bring female impersonation into millions of living rooms, disguised as entertainment but loaded with subversion. And yet, like so many others, Bailey's name faded once the curtain fell. He proved drag could be art, but Hollywood only applauded until the cameras stopped rolling. A living echo of legends, Bailey performed their pain, their beauty, their ghosts, and then, just like the stars he channeled, he vanished. Number 11. Craig Russell, the Hollywood librarian in heels. Craig Russell didn't impersonate Hollywood icons. He studied them like a scholar with a film reel and a mission. Every flick of the wrist, every tilt of the head, every icy glare from Bette Davis or breathy whisper from Mae West, Russell had it memorized. Born in Toronto, he wasn't just a performer. He was a walking, talking time capsule of golden age stardom. But unlike his predecessors, Russell brought that glamour back to life on his own terms. Openly gay, unapologetically theatrical, and dangerously good at what he did. His impressions weren't just accurate. They were emotionally raw. He didn't parody these women. He resurrected them. And he didn't need a Vegas stage to prove it. In 1977, Russell starred in Outrageous, a groundbreaking film that dared to center a drag performer not as comic relief, but as a leading man. Critics loved it. Audiences were stunned. And yet Hollywood barely knew what to do with him. He wasn't safe. He wasn't neutral. He was real, and that was scary. Russell's act could switch between 24 characters in one night. It wasn't just impersonation. It was transformation, so complete that it blurred the line between tribute and possession. And yet, for all his talent, Craig Russell remains a cult figure, honored by drag legends, but largely invisible in the history Hollywood writes about itself. He brought the old stars back to life, but Hollywood never gave him a star of his own. Number 10. Danny LaRue. The crown jewel of British drag. In America, drag was taboo. In Britain, Danny LaRue turned it into royalty. He didn't sneak into the spotlight. He marched onto center stage, draped in sequins, feathers, and designer gowns that cost more than a London townhouse. Born Daniel Patrick Carroll in Ireland, LaRue didn't just wear the dress, he owned the room. With razor-sharp wit and over-the-top elegance, he became the highest-paid entertainer in Britain, beloved by everyone from working-class families to royalty. Princess Margaret herself was a fan. He performed for the crown, and unlike most female impersonators, he didn't perform in borrowed spaces. He built his own. His club Danny's, in London's West End, wasn't just a venue, it was a phenomenon. But Danny knew how to play the game. He called himself a comic in a frock, making his act feel lighthearted and safe. Offstage, he stayed out of character, reminding audiences that it was just performance. That careful line between illusion and identity made him one of the few drag performers who found mainstream respect instead of ridicule. He wasn't threatening, he was charming. And that's how he brought drag into British living rooms during a time when it was still scandalous across the ocean. But make no mistake, behind the sparkle was strategy. Danny LaRue dazzled with elegance, but survived with brilliance. He didn't just cross boundaries, he redrew them. Number 9. Barbette. The Phantom of the Wire. Barbette didn't walk a tightrope. He danced on it, in heels, in gowns, suspended between illusion and danger. Audiences gasped at the grace, the beauty, the flawless femininity, and then he'd rip off the wig. Born Vanderclyde Broadway in Texas, Barbette wasn't just a performer, he was a provocation. In the 1920s and 30s, while America buried itself in rules and repression, Barbette soared above it all, literally. He performed acrobatics and trapeze acts that could rival the finest aerialists of the day, all while presenting as a glamorous woman. But the reveal? That moment when he exposed his identity mid-performance, it wasn't a gimmick, it was a statement, a silent rebellion. European artists were hypnotized. Surrealists like Jean Cocteau found in Barbette not just a performer, but a living paradox, masculine and feminine, art and spectacle, illusion and truth. He graced the world's most prestigious stages, from the Casino de Paris to the London Palladium, pulling audiences into a performance that made them question everything they thought they knew about gender. And yet, Barbette's name too has faded. Despite his obituary running in the New York Times, his influence remains whispered, remembered only by scholars and artists who dare to look past the mainstream narrative. Barbette was elegance wrapped in danger. His performances didn't just defy gravity, they defied identity. Number 8. Julian Eltinge. The man who was too perfect. Before RuPaul, before Drag Race, before anyone dared whisper about gender on stage, there was Julian Eltinge. And in the early 1900s, he wasn't underground. He was a superstar. Born William Julian Dalton in 1881, Eltinge mastered the art of illusion so perfectly that audiences were left speechless when he revealed himself as a man. His transformations were so flawless, so convincing, that a Broadway theater was named after him in 1912, the Julian Eltinge Theater, right on 42nd Street. He wasn't camp, he wasn't exaggerated. He studied women, how they moved, spoke, smiled, with clinical detail. When he stepped on stage, people didn't see impersonation, they saw believability. But off stage, Eltinge worked twice as hard to appear aggressively masculine. Photos of him boxing, smoking cigars, and doing manly things flooded the press. It was survival. America loved the illusion, but only if it stayed on stage. At his peak, he earned the modern equivalent of $60,000 a week. That's how powerful his presence was. But fame is fickle. As the roaring 20s faded and the conservative 30s tightened their grip, Eltinge's art became suspect. Female impersonation was now being tied to homosexuality, and laws began banning men from wearing women's clothes in public. By the 1940s, he was reduced to standing beside racks of dresses, merely pointing at what he used to wear. The man once hailed as Broadway's crown jewel died in near obscurity in 1941. Julian Eltinge didn't just vanish, he was erased. He played the part too well, and Hollywood couldn't handle it. Number 7. Bert Savoy. The queen of camp who laughed at lightning. Bert Savoy didn't aim for realism. He aimed for riotous laughter and jaw-dropping flair. With fiery red wigs, exaggerated makeup, and a booming voice, he stormed vaudeville stages like a drag hurricane, inviting the crowd to laugh with him, not at him. Born Everett Mackenzie, Savoy wasn't trying to fool anyone. He wasn't about illusion, he was about outrageous honesty. His performances dripped with sarcasm, sass, and innuendo, and America ate it up. His catchphrase, "You don't know the half of it, dearie," became a cultural staple. Everyone from teenagers to grandmothers was repeating it in the 1920s. But Bert wasn't just a funny man in a dress. He was a pioneer who inspired legends. Mae West, with her sultry swagger and comedic timing, borrowed heavily from Savoy's flamboyant female persona. A woman modeling her act after a man impersonating a woman. Now that's a twist only Hollywood could produce. Then came the day that turned Bert into a legend. He was walking on Long Beach during a thunderstorm. As lightning flashed above, he looked to the sky and quipped, "That'll be me, darling." Moments later, he was struck by lightning and killed instantly. You couldn't script a more dramatic exit. But Savoy's story didn't end with applause. As censorship tightened and morality codes swept Hollywood, his bold performances became too much, too risky, too flamboyant. So they buried him, not with headlines, but with silence. He lit up stages with laughter until lightning took him out in one final fabulous punchline. Number 6. Jean Malin, the star who dared too early. Jean Malin didn't just flirt with gender boundaries. He smashed them, decades before the world was ready. In speakeasies and jazz clubs of the 1920s, he didn't hide behind wigs or falsettos. Sometimes he wore drag, sometimes he didn't, but every time he owned the room. Born Jean Malin in Brooklyn in 1908, he became one of the first openly gay entertainers in America. He didn't present as male or female. He floated somewhere in between. One night he might sing in a gown, the next in a tuxedo. But whatever he wore, people came to watch. By the age of 22, Malin was making waves in Los Angeles, earning $250 a week, a modern equivalent of over $4,000. He was charismatic, magnetic, and unapologetically bold in an era when being seen was dangerous. He even broke into Hollywood, appearing in films like Arizona to Broadway in 1933. But the spotlight came with shadows. Studio heads loved his talent but hated his truth. Roles were limited, whispers got louder. And then he was gone. Just weeks after filming wrapped, Malin performed at the Ship Cafe in Venice, California. After the show, he got into a car with two friends. Moments later, the vehicle suddenly reversed, accelerating backward off the pier and crashing violently. Jean Malin was killed. He was just 25 years old. The official story called it a bizarre accident. But rumors, they never stopped. Whispers of sabotage, of jealousy, of Hollywood wanting him out. No one could prove it. No one ever will. But what's certain is this: Jean Malin was too bold, too brave, and too early. And for that, Hollywood looked the other way. Number 5. Ray Bourbon, the rebel. Ray Bourbon wasn't just controversial, he was radioactive. While other performers tiptoed around boundaries, Ray sprinted straight through them, leaving scorched stages and scandal in his wake. Born Hal Wadsworth, or so the records claim, Bourbon's life was a swirl of aliases, mystery, and blurred lines. His performances were loaded with provocative jokes, outrageous costumes, and a sharp tongue that mocked morality in a time when even a hint of queerness could end careers. He didn't play it safe. His comedy albums had titles like Hilarious Songs for Gay Ladies, works so provocative that record stores refused to carry them. He sold them at live shows instead, slipping smut and satire into brown paper bags like contraband. As the 1930s gave way to a more conservative, paranoid America, Bourbon was shoved underground, pushed into nightclubs, queer bars, and forgotten lounges. Still, he kept performing, mocking, provoking, but it was never just about the act. Ray Bourbon was a threat to the system, refusing to conform, refusing to disappear. And in the end, that refusal came with a price. In 1968, at the age of 76, he was arrested for murder. Details were murky. The trial, even murkier. Some called it justice, others called it a setup. Regardless, Ray was convicted and sent to prison. He died behind bars in 1971, his story buried with him. No tribute, no farewell, no legacy. Ray Bourbon had mocked the powerful, questioned the rules, and danced on the line between satire and sedition. And Hollywood, it made sure his name was forgotten. He didn't just break the rules, he humiliated them. And they never forgave him for it. Number 4. Gladys Bentley, the woman who wore the truth too loud. Gladys Bentley didn't impersonate anyone. She didn't wear wigs, fake voices, or padded silhouettes. She wore a white tuxedo, a top hat, a smirk, and walked straight into history like she owned it. Towering over 6 feet tall and weighing in at 250 pounds, Bentley was a jazz and blues singer who commanded Harlem's hottest clubs in the 1920s. She didn't soften her edges, she sharpened them. She sang raunchy lyrics that would have made censors faint. She flirted with women in the crowd boldly, publicly. She played piano like it owed her money, and she did it all in full male attire, never once apologizing for who she was. In a world where most performers disguised their identities to survive, Bentley did the unthinkable. She amplified hers. She even reportedly married a white woman in a civil ceremony in Atlantic City, a staggering move for the time, especially as a black, openly lesbian woman in segregated America. But the applause didn't last. As the McCarthy era tightened its grip, Gladys became a target. The same voice that once lit up clubs was now labeled dangerous. In 1952, she appeared in Ebony magazine in a chilling article titled, "I Am a Woman Again." In it, she claimed to have undergone hormone therapy to cure her homosexuality, married a man, and returned to Christianity. Whether it was true or simply survival theater, no one can say for certain. But something had changed. The fire in her lyrics went quiet. She died in 1960 at just 52. No legacy, no monument, no Hollywood biopic. Gladys Bentley didn't dress as a man to shock. She dressed that way because that was her, and that terrified a country still terrified of truth. They didn't silence her with violence. They silenced her with forgetting. Number 3. Billy Tipton. The secret that died with him. Billy Tipton wasn't a drag performer. He wasn't doing impressions. He wasn't on stage in a wig playing a role. He lived as a man every day for nearly 50 years, and no one, not even his closest family, ever knew the truth. Born Dorothy Lucille Tipton in 1914 in Oklahoma, Billy fell in love with jazz. But in the 1930s, women weren't allowed into that world. Not really. So Tipton made a choice. He bound his chest, dressed in men's suits, lowered his voice, and took on a new name, Billy. What started as a disguise for opportunity became something far deeper. Tipton didn't just pass as a man, he built an entire life around it. He toured with swing bands, formed the Billy Tipton Trio, and gained moderate fame. But more than that, he loved, he married, he adopted 3 sons. His wives believed he was a man. His children called him Dad. And no one, not a single person, questioned it. Then, in 1989, Tipton collapsed at home. Paramedics arrived, and the truth unraveled. Billy Tipton, the jazz man, the husband, the father, had been assigned female at birth. His family was shattered, his sons were blindsided. The media pounced, turning his death into a spectacle, a punchline, a headline. But no one stopped to ask, why did Billy have to hide in the first place? He didn't perform gender on stage. He didn't mock or parody or pose. He simply became the person he needed to be, and for decades he pulled it off flawlessly. Billy Tipton didn't die exposed. He died undefeated. Number 2. Divine. The queen of filth, who flipped the script. Divine wasn't trying to look pretty. She was trying to obliterate the idea that beauty mattered at all. With smeared lipstick, shaved eyebrows, towering wigs, and a body built like a battering ram, Divine didn't ask for approval. She dared you to look away. Born Harris Glenn Milstead in Baltimore, Divine crashed into culture like a wrecking ball in heels. His rise began in the 1970s, alongside filmmaker John Waters, in cult classics that were so shocking they still can't be fully described today. In Pink Flamingos, Divine didn't act, he assaulted norms. Every performance was a middle finger to gender roles, morality, and good taste. But here's the twist. It wasn't just grotesque for shock's sake. It was performance art, satire, rebellion. Divine's drag wasn't about illusion. It was about explosion. He took the expectations of femininity, set them on fire, and danced in the ashes. And people loved it. Beyond the underground, Divine's fame exploded into music and even mainstream film. He starred in the original Hairspray 1988, playing Edna Turnblad with both absurdity and soul. That role, once a joke, became iconic. He also stormed dance floors, releasing hits like You Think You're a Man and I'm So Beautiful, bringing drag to the club scene long before it was trendy. But just as Divine was breaking into full-blown stardom, he was gone. He died in 1988 of heart failure, the night before a scheduled guest spot on Married with Children. The mainstream had finally opened the door, and he never got to walk through it. Divine didn't play drag. He weaponized it. He turned disgust into empowerment, shame into satire, and made the grotesque glorious. He didn't want your applause, he wanted your discomfort. And he got it. Number 1. Charles Pierce. The illusionist who made you forget it was an act. Charles Pierce didn't need glitter. He didn't need gowns. He didn't even need a wig. All he needed was a cigarette holder, a scarf, a stare, and suddenly, you weren't watching a man, you were watching Bette Davis come alive again. Born in Watertown, New York, Pierce wasn't just a female impersonator. He was a genius of transformation. With a razor-sharp mind and unmatched performance control, he became the grand dames of Hollywood, not in drag, but in essence. Joan Crawford, Tallulah Bankhead, Katharine Hepburn. Pierce didn't mimic them, he channeled them. Every voice inflection, every icy glare, every micro-expression was calculated to perfection. What set him apart was restraint. While others relied on heavy costumes or caricature, Pierce would walk on stage in a simple black dress, maybe a brooch or a prop, and the moment he opened his mouth, you forgot who he really was. Critics didn't call him a drag act, they called him a master character actor. He performed live, not lip-syncing, but speaking and singing in real time, capturing not just appearance but emotion. His performances weren't just impressions, they were commentary. He peeled back the glossy layers of Hollywood's most iconic women and showed you the cracks underneath, the loneliness, the rage, the control. He headlined the Coconut Grove, the Persian Room, and was respected in the same breath as mainstream cabaret stars. But for all the applause, he was still working in a time when gender nonconformity was unspoken in the public eye. And so, like the actresses he portrayed, he became both legend and ghost, loved, feared, misunderstood, immortal. Charles Pierce wasn't dressing up. He was telling the truth, disguised as someone else, and no one ever did it better. The curtain falls, but the illusion stays. So now you know. Beneath the glamour of Hollywood's golden age was a stage far more daring than anything on screen, a world where illusion wasn't just performance, it was survival. These 15 performers didn't just entertain, they challenged reality. Some vanished in tragedy. Others built empires from sequins and shadows. A few were mocked, many were erased. But all of them, every single one, changed the game. They bent the rules, blurred the lines, and forced audiences to ask, what really makes a man, what really makes a woman, and who gets to decide? Hollywood sold perfection. But these artists sold truth, wrapped in silk, sweat, and spotlight. If this video shocked you, moved you, or made you see the past in a whole new way, don't scroll yet. Drop a comment below. Who surprised you the most? Which story hit hardest? And what other secrets from old Hollywood do you want us to expose next? And of course, tap subscribe, smash that like, and ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive into the hidden corners of entertainment history. Because here, the stories are never as simple as they seem. And the truth, it's always hiding behind the curtain.